Morals and ethics. What's the difference? We see them used a lot, actually interchangeably these days, especially online or in other literary devices. And there's not a whole lot between the two. With modern syntax, you kind of get the gist between the two of them. There is, however, for the purpose of today's discussion, an important distinction between the two. For a brief rundown, morals tend to be sort of an overarching sense of good and bad or good and evil, usually set down by societal or cultural norms from either religious bodies or just geographic locations or cultural subsets of what is held important to these groups of people. What may be a moral high ground in one area is actually a moral low ground in another area. It's very subjective. Ethics are usually a little more concrete, sort of a preset group of governing ideas that are usually set down, most common by a business sense or sort of committee. Ethical ideas determine what is right and what is wrong, not as so much a good or bad kind of thing, but what is correct and what is incorrect for that entity, that enterprise, for that point in time, or as an individual. Where morals generally are dictated by a group of people who determine, be it a jury or religious body, determines what is good and what is evil. Ethics, such as one of the most common terms, a work ethic, is something that's 100% individualized. As far as work ethic goes, you are the master of managing your own work schedule. You get yourself up out of bed, you get to work. It's up to you to be on time, to do a good job, whether or not your supervisor is watching you, whether or not there's anybody around dictating your performance or your behavior. That is ethics. And I get asked a lot, and I see it presented a lot, how can you be a Satanist? How can you be an atheist? How can you not have any religious doctrine and still have a moral compass and still have a set of morality? And really, there again, morality is very, it comes after the fact. It's a lesson learned. It's the moral of a story. For instance, as far as a tale of morality goes, a wolf was stalking around a sheep's herd. We like to use wolves a lot in Satanism, in case you haven't noticed. And he came across a discarded sheepskin. And he came up with the idea, hey, if I don this sheepskin, I will be able to move in closer to the herd. The shepherd will not recognize me, and I'll be able to feast as I like. Well, he did, and turns out, come the end of the day, he was actually herded in with the sheep into the barn where he was able to feast to his delight. The wolf continued to use this technique night after night, getting brought in with the sheep every night, until one night when the shepherd sent his son out to slaughter sheep for dinner. Guess who he got? He got the wolf. The moral of that story is indulgence over compulsion. Too much of a good thing can end up leading to a bad thing, or don't, in essence, shit where you eat. I'm probably butchering that story, but I hope it paints a clear picture of what a moral is, whereas an ethic is more of a group or bodies of companies generally sit down and decide, things like corporate espionage. Are we going to steal each other's secrets? Are we going to divulge this amount of information? And are generally, the thing with ethics actually is they're not so concrete as a morality or a set of morals, in that they're generally described with an example. For instance, say a well-to-do shop owner has a very good friend who's very down on his luck, and this man needs a job, needs money in order to save his starving children. So this shop owner circumvents any semblance of application process, any interview process, and he hires the man. He gives him a job, allows him to feed and, in essence, save his children. Morally, he did a good thing. He helped this man in his time of need. But ethically, what he did was wrong. He circumvented the entire process. There are other more qualified applicants who need that job as well, but he gave the job to his friend because he felt morally obligated to help his friend, while ethically did a disservice to his company and the set of rules that they had. So how do we self-govern as Satanists without any sort of overall code? Well, quite honestly, I like living in civilized society. I don't know about any of you, but that allows me to work in my profession, to drive my car on nice roads and not be run into by roving gangs of post-apocalyptic scavengers. It keeps the lights on with our city's infrastructure, and we don't have to kill or rob each other for food. These things are all imposed by governments, yes, but even without a government, without commercialism or capitalism, we would still fall into a strong rule the weak mentality and a barter system to get our goods and our services. Would we not? The only time morality and ethics don't really apply in that sense or need any sort of moral compass is if you lived out in the woods on your own, and the only person there to judge you is your horse or other beast of burden that you assume you would have with you. Socially, we are the most highly developed animal in that we have the most complex bodies. We have, the individual is attached to a family and a social network, and then these social networks form the entire basis of the civilization that we live in. Yes, there is a moral code that has been steeped in religious dogma and religious doctrine. The however to that is we all like eating hot meals with our families. We don't like killing or raping anybody. And quite frankly, the idea that we need some astral body in the sky or some holy man or some street preacher to tell us that we need these things is actually mildly insulting. The idea that without the proverbial nun slapping you on the knuckles, that we would just devolve into murdering, thieving, drug-abusing monsters is, point of fact, it's insulting that it's assumed that we, or me especially as an individual, that I need that guiding hand in my life, when quite frankly I've proved time and again, with my own family, with my own job, with my own social network, and just as a productive member of society, I've proved time and again that that's not necessary. If you choose to live by a moral code, one that is of your own design and one that benefits society, so be it. The most important one, however, is what do your ethics entail? To me, that is the most important part. How do you behave when there's nobody there to hold you accountable? When there's no moral framework to guide your actions, what do you do as an individual? This is where things, like modern etiquette and things like chivalry come into play, because there's no good guy badges in ethics. When you do what is right, nobody should notice. Everything should be carrying on as normal. When you do something wrong or incorrectly, you're presented with an opportunity to correct yourself and to make things right and to carry on wiser, one would hope. When you work in a moral framework, that is an established body of good and bad. So when you're adhering to what is good, we get a lot of people that these days especially are expecting a pat on the head every time they do something nice or good or morally just. They have to Instagram it, tweet it, put it on Facebook. They have to get that good guy badge, which has been talked about before, and within Satanism is one of those things that you don't necessarily want. Ethically, we have a responsibility to ourselves to maintain our aesthetics, to maintain our good relationships with our friends and our families, to be, there again, a productive member of society. There is no overall framework. There's no man in the sky. Your mom's not there, harassing you with a switch at every turn to get you to adhere to certain benchmarks that keep the wheels of society moving. It comes to our own sense of ethics to do that. God, Satan, Allah, Buddha, they don't have anything to do with it. Even their doctrines are all based on morality. Dogmatic law is based on morality. Karma is based on the good you put out is the good that you get back. Same with the bad that you put out is the bad that you get back. There again, ethics has nothing really to do with that. It is very much on you, on me, on us to maintain this level of civilization that we have. And clearly, as we're seeing, living as Satanists, or if you're not a Satanist and you're just checking this out, you will see that Satanists, in fact, are some of the most righteous and just people. Morally, we're not obligated to do what is good. I, for instance, don't feel the need to always tell the truth, especially in certain circumstances where ethically a lie would do far better. The simple one is always the white lie. You know, when my wife, she is the most beautiful woman on the planet, but she is not the nubile 19-year-old that I fell in love with. So when she asks me how something looks on her, and I tell her that she is still the woman, she hasn't aged a day, the feeling that she gets, that rush of endorphins, she knows it's not true, but to hear me say it to her gives her that dopamine, that serotonin, that reassurance that she needs from me to know that I still find her attractive. Whereas morally, we should be telling the truth to everybody, and if someone in your life is putting on extra weight or is not as smart as they want to be, morally we should be telling them these things. And to a certain extent, we absolutely should not spare feelings when it becomes detrimental. Quick clarification there. I will not spare my wife's feelings. If she thinks something looks really good on her, but it doesn't, I don't want her going out in public where, other people are going to see, and ridicule her or things like that. Not that ever happens, and I really should stop using my wife as an example. Not fair to her or anything like that. But ethically, we should be using our words, we should be using our time and our resources to help promote those in our lives, to help build them up so that we grow stronger. There again, that is that social, cultural advancement that I was talking about. And ethics is what will help drive that. Morality helps keep things in line and help keep the ducks in line, so to speak. But at the end of the day, who are you when nobody's around to call you on your bullshit? Who are you, or what do you do when there's nobody there to crack the whip and get you moving? What are your guiding principles and where do they come from? Are you learning them after the fact like a moral, or are you establishing them beforehand before you go into it? Things to think about. I'm not trying to demonize either of these or prioritize one over the other. Really, I'm just trying to provide some food for thought for your own motivations, because we don't need it from on high. We need it from in here. So think about that the next time you're making a grand decision or starting on a course of action or even second guessing something in your life. Are you looking at it from a stance of morals? If so, where do they come from? Or are you looking at it ethically? And if so, what are your ethics? What are important to you? And how can you use them to better your life? Simple as that. Hail Satan.